All right, so
Not
what
really.
is this residential center?
One pastor gave his wife a $200,000 Lamborghini, paid for by his followers. Another begged for a $65 million jet while his church members struggled to pay rent. And one caught on tape laundering money through the church. These are the rich black pastors who lied about God for profit. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be shocked who's still preaching today. Starting up, we have Pastor John Gray, a man who always looked like he'd been destined for great things. But when they eventually fell into his laps, he began wanting more than was his fair share. Gray first started his preaching career as an associate pastor at Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church in Lakewood, Texas. Being one of the biggest megachurches in America, the large crowd of faithfuls who flocked there every Sunday were attracted to Gray's dynamic preaching style and relatable personality. Then, in 2018, Gray decided he wanted to go solo and founded Relentless Church in Greenville. But with his new leadership position came even more scrutiny. One of the biggest moments came in December of 2018 when he bought his wife, Avantair, a gift. But this wasn't just any anniversary gift. It was a Lamborghini Urus, costing around $200,000. The fallout was huge, with many people thoroughly convinced that Gray had financed the splurgy gift with the tithes, offerings, and donations gotten from gullible congregants. But Gray did not move an inch and took to social media to refute all of the claims being made against him.
First of all, it wasn't a pastor that bought the car. It was a husband that bought the car. Get that in your spirit.
Bear in mind, a month before then, Gray had been in the news for something else.
Go ahead, there's some 20s in here.
He'd denounced pulpit pimps, pastors who used their position to extort their flock. Instead, Gray was going against all of that and invited churchgoers to walk up to the altar and take from the offering baskets. Single parents, war veterans, and widows were among those who benefited from this gesture. Social media and public opinion had praised the Greenville when he'd made that altruistic action which he'd claimed was inspired by God. But when barely a month afterwards he'd gone and splashed $250,000 on just one car, everyone couldn't help thinking that his earlier kindness had been performative, a mere public stunt designed to garner public support before the real drama would come. Coming in at number 7, we've got Creflo Dollar. Now, if there's anyone who embodies the whole idea of the prosperity gospel, it's him. Prosperity preachers, especially those in some charismatic and Pentecostal Christian circles, claim that God wants Christian believers to be financially successful and physically healthy as part of salvation and a reward for faith. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Of course, there wouldn't be anything the matter with these beliefs if they actually worked for all parties involved. But in most cases, especially with Creflo Dollar, only one person seems to benefit at the end of the day, and that's the pastor. His last name already sounds parodic enough, but even more laughable are the ways he's continued to scam faithful church members. In March 2015, his name was all over the tabloids, and for the wrong reasons. Dollar had asked church members to donate their hard-earned money so that Creflo Dollar Ministries could purchase a Gulfstream G650 private jet. His reason? The ministry's 30-year-old Gulfstream jet was no longer operable after an accident in London when the jet slid off the runway during an aborted takeoff. The scheme was named Project G650. They even made a video ad for it, which was posted on the ministry's website.
I am so determined to preach this gospel around this world because people are condemned, people are filled with guilt and shame. They've not come to the place of understanding what Jesus has done. Recently, I was on my way to Australia at the invitation of Planet Shakers to minister, and we were on our way over the Pacific Ocean. And about an hour into the trip, the right engine went out.
Our current ministry plane is no longer usable. We need your help. and I ask all of our partners globally to get on board with Project G650.
We are believing for 200,000 people to give contributions of $300 or more to make this a reality.
According to Rick Hayes, who was the project manager, 200,000 global supporters of the ministry were being solicited to put down a sum of $300 each to make up $60 million for the jet, which actually cost $65 million. Their support would help the ministry get the jet in a very short time. According to the ad, the luxury jet would transport Pastors Creflo and Taffy Dollar, as well as other members of the Dollar's Church, around the globe to help them spread the gospel. It could carry a crew of 2, and if the cabin was tweaked well enough, it could carry between 11 to 18 passengers. Speed-wise, the G650 could cruise at up to 610 miles per hour, with a range of up to 7,000 nautical miles. The outrage was deafening. What did a pastor want with such an expensive aircraft? And why was he making church members pay for it? The internet was awash with different think pieces, and before long the ads were taken down. What didn't get removed, however, was Dollar's interest in flying a G650. Barely months later, the board of World Changers Church International declared that they were, in fact, going ahead with their plans for the jet. According to them, the G650 was the best and a perfect reflection of the level of excellence at which their organization chose to operate.
If I want to believe God for a $65 million plane, you cannot stop me. You cannot stop me from dreaming.
Dollar claimed his faith had gotten him the jet, but as time would prove, that couldn't be any more farther from the truth. While many of Dollar's church members struggled to pay rent, Dollar lived in million-dollar homes across Atlanta, New Jersey, and Manhattan. Top secret files were leaked, and it turned out only 10% of the raised donations were put into charitable causes. The rest of the money went into maintenance for his luxury fleet of cars, and even the jet itself. Then an even crazier thing happened in 2022. Creflo Dollar suddenly came forward and took back everything he'd said all these years about tithing, claiming it was outdated and wasn't exactly biblical either. The man basically got rich off a lie and only confessed after the checks had cleared. But if you found Dollar's use of tithes to source funds for an extravagant lifestyle sneaky, this next preacher was a lot more brazen with his fraud. At number 6, we've got another prosperity preacher, Prophet Shepherd Bushri. His followers called him Major One, but what this guy actually majored in was fabricating magic tricks and calling them miracles. Bushri started his religious career in Malawi, but eventually moved over his enlightened Christian gathering to South Africa. There, his charisma, weird miracles, and prophetic utterances gained him a widespread following. But before long, Bushiri decided that instead of just leading people to heaven, he could also lead their money into his pockets too. He claimed an ability to do a number of interesting things like walking on air, teleporting, curing blindness, and even HIV, but most of all, supernaturally anointing his followers' bank accounts remotely. All they had to do to unlock this was sow a seed of faith. But the only miraculous thing here was how his congregation didn't run for the exits. Instead, like moths to a flame, they filled stadiums, enamored by this miracle-working man. Of course, they remained in penury, and rightly so. Meanwhile, the man they were throwing money at lived in opulence. He amassed a net worth of about $150 million just off of the lies he was feeding his church members. In Bushiri's possession were fleets of Bentleys, a multi-million-dollar mansion in Pretoria, and luxury private jets he claimed were for gospel missions. In 2018, Botswana shut down a Bushiri church in the country. He'd claimed that money could be summoned out of nothing, which contravened financial regulations. Before the church's closure in 2018, Bushiri had already been declared persona non grata in May 2017.
Major!
Finally, in 2019, he and his wife were arrested by South African authorities. Their offense? Money laundering, fraud, and theft of more than $7 million, some 102 million South African rands. But here's where things get crazy. After being granted bail, the Bushiris fled in a private jet. Their destination? Malawi. Bushiri claimed the South African authorities weren't doing enough to protect his life. There they were arrested again, but eventually freed on the basis that their arrest was unprocedural. Efforts to extradite them to South Africa have proved abortive, and the case is still in court. And yet, for some reason, with over 70 branches worldwide, Bushiri still has a crowd of faithfuls who believe in him till this very day. Next, we've got the Bishop Thomas Dexter Jakes. Now, to be fair, he's pretty clean in his own right, but in recent years it feels like he's blurred the lines between religious leader and business mogul a little too much. In 1996, Jakes founded the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. Today, some 17,000 people call it their home church. He's one of the world's most prominent and recognizable preachers, as his The Potter's House broadcast is viewed by millions. Every year, 100,000 people show up for this event, Megafest. Oprah Winfrey was even a special guest in 2013. He's written more than 40 bestsellers and even appeared on the cover of Times Magazine in September of 2001. According to income tax returns filed in 1996, he and his wife Sarita earned $1.6 million that year. So yeah, he's actually pretty successful. The problem we've got with him is how he's achieved that success. I mean, why else would he suddenly decide to keep his current income private just 5 years later? Here's why. His audience here in America is pretty huge, and it's even bigger around the rest of the world. And while he might be a lot more suave than the other prosperity preachers, he's still after his members' pockets. Overpriced books are just one part of the story. A Ticket to Woman, Thou Art Loosed, one of his most popular church programs, ranges from around $150 to $500. That's a lot of money for stuff you could easily just teach people during regular Sunday service. But at the end of the day, it's really what it is. A capitalist trying to make as much as he can from the position he's in. It's just that this time, he's on the pulpit, but it's not just the profiteering that sucks. There's misappropriation too. Several of the ministry's former employees have come forward alleging that church resources, obviously funded by the people's tithes and offerings, were being routinely used to bankroll Bishop Jakes' personal projects. Take, for example, his 2014 film, Heaven is for Real. The production costs for the movie were actually covered in part by donations originally meant for disaster relief. Doesn't speak so well for a man of God, does it? Coming in at number 4, we've got Bishop Eddie Long. He's long dead now, bless his soul, but we're going to air his dirty laundry nonetheless. Before his tragic death in 2017, Bishop Eddie Long was one of the most influential megachurch pastors in the whole of America. At some point, every Sunday, 25,000 people would come to worship at his New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. But behind the pulpit lurked a nasty web of ugly secrets that nearly tore down his empire once they surfaced. You see, throughout his career, Long was a poster child for the prosperity gospel. He told his followers that their faith and generosity would be rewarded by God with wealth here on earth and eternity in heaven in the afterlife. And you could bet he was living what he preached, or at least the parts of it that fit into his schedule. Long flew private jets, drove a $350,000 Bentley, and lived in a $1.4 million mansion that had 6 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. We'll come to why he likely needed that many in a minute. While Long was also a gospel singer and author, it was his extravagance that caught everyone's attention. Then, in 2010, 4 young men came forward with disturbing allegations.
I was 14 when I moved to Atlanta. Take my number down, call me. I'm 14 years old, I'm new to the state. I can't. Like, what do we got to talk about? We're not even in the same league. When I got in trouble at school, I called him, and the next day, my mom came, picked me up, and the teacher was actually saying, "Can I keep my job?" I apologize. And that's how I actually got.
According to Spencer Legrand, Anthony Flagg, Maurice Robinson, and Jamal Paris, Long had used his spiritual authority to lure them into relationships. The catch? Expensive gifts, trips to exotic locations all over the world, and even more expensive stays in the best luxury hotels. They also claimed that many other church members had known about the abuse for a while, but had chosen to cover for Long. Long would give them money and expensive jewelry in exchange for oral sodomy, and them calling him Dad. Of course, Long denied everything, calling the allegations ugly charges, but instead of fighting them like he'd told his congregation, he decided to settle out of court with the accusers. The settlements were reportedly to the tune of millions, but since they included NDAs, we never really got to hear the full story concerning what had happened. But wait, there's even more. In 2009, Long invited self-styled social capitalist Efren Taylor to speak at his church. Backed by Long, Taylor pitched investment opportunities to members with promises of huge returns. But what unsuspecting worshipers hadn't known was that 2 weeks before hosting Taylor, Long had been warned about his company's $3 million deficit and shady practices. But he'd let him go ahead, causing people to lose their money. One woman lost $122,000 in savings. Members would later sue Long for not protecting them from the scam. And yet, until his death to cancer, thousands still flocked over to see Long every Sunday, completely convinced that he was a true man of God. Next, we have Bishop Clarence McClendon. Now, if you're someone who follows the black church world, this is one man whose name has been making quite the buzz, not just for his powerful sermons, but also for the whirlwind of scandals that have followed him for years. McClendon first started preaching when he was only 19 years old. Today, he's the senior pastor of Full Harvest International Church in Inglewood, Los Angeles. It's pretty easy to understand why the people love him so much. The sermons are electrifying, and for many people struggling with credit scores and soaring bills, his message of prosperity and faith is the opium. But soon, McClendon began charging for this supposedly free gift. Members were encouraged to sow seeds into the ministry, with promises of bountiful blessings from God. Many of them, however, were struggling to make ends meet, probably behind on rent, too. Yet they'd empty out their little cons for the man of God, convinced that they'd be rewarded soon. Behind the scenes, however, things looked very, very different. Leaked financial records suggested that the donations weren't just funding church programs, they were funding McClendon's private investments. In fact, some of the money was even going into hidden accounts. But there was still more to come. At the end of 2022, nonprofit records filed on Form 990 for Clarence E. McClendon Ministries, also known as Full Harvest International Church, showed some disturbing information. The church had spent roughly $4 million that year, but they'd only made around $3.8 million. The ministry was running on a net loss of $244,000. Yet for some reason, McClendon's take-home for that year stayed the same as the previous year. Doesn't sound very much like the self-serving message he tried to preach to his congregants, does it?
You must enter into this realm now, sir. You have struggled enough. We don't struggle here. Find out why we don't struggle. We don't struggle, we don't sweat here to flow in supplies. Why are you struggling so hard?
Now, whenever you think of Nigerian megachurches, there's one name that absolutely towers over all the rest. It's Bishop David Oyedepo. This man doesn't just run a church, he rules a kingdom, and with an iron fist, too. In September of 1983, he founded the Living Faith Church, now also known as Winners Chapel International. Today, they have branches in over 300 cities worldwide, including all 45 African countries. He's widely considered as one of the early leaders of the charismatic movement in Nigeria. In 2011, Forbes named him Nigeria's richest pastor, and today he's estimated to be worth more than $150 million. Oh, and there's the part about him being the chancellor or Covenant and Landmark universities. At the center of it all all is the Faith Tabernacle in Canaan land, OTA. With a 50,000-seat capacity, it's so big that at some point, the auditorium held a Guinness World Record. Let's be fair, all of this is pretty glamorous stuff. But what about the parts they don't show you? Bishop Oyedepo owns an imposing fleet of cars, including multiple Rolls-Royce Cullinans he received on his birthday. He also owns 4 private jets, namely a Bombardier Challenger 604, a Grumman Gulfstream IG-159, a Gulfstream 4G4, and a Gulfstream 5G5. But there's more. Oyedepo owns an estate across Nigeria and the U.S. And let's not forget the elite empire of businesses, including the universities where tuition fees are so expensive, only a select few of his church members can afford to enroll their kids in. For a man who only worked a short stint with the Federal Ministry of Housing before diving into full-time ministry, we've got to ask, where did he suddenly get all the money for this stuff? The answer's simple: manipulation. A prosperity gospel adherent, Oyedepo always makes it clear to his congregation, tithing is the way to prosperity. So basically, if you're still broke, then it's your fault for not giving enough. Giving enough to who, you may ask? Why, him, of course. Finally, we've got Hubert Angel, a self-proclaimed prophet with an international following and a luxurious lifestyle that has raised serious questions. Originally from Zimbabwe, Angel built his brand by preaching the prosperity gospel, a message that links financial success to faith. His sermons promised healing, wealth, and visa approvals in exchange for seed offerings. The logic was simple: give more to receive more. For many struggling believers, it sounded like hope, but for critics, it looked more like manipulation. His influence grew rapidly, and so did his fortune. Multi-million-dollar mansions, fleets of luxury cars, private jets, and designer clothing became part of his public image, justified as signs of divine favor. But behind the scenes, a different story began to unfold. In 2023, an undercover investigation by Al Jazeera exposed alarming conversations involving Angel and his associates. In the recordings, they discussed how to launder large sums of money using church donations, gold deals, and diplomatic privileges. One particular clip featured Angel himself claiming, "I can help you launder money. I'm very good at that."
You want a gold? God, we can do it right now. We can make the call right now, and it's done with the president of Miners Association right this minute. Buy gold and maybe send a private jet, picks up gold every week.
Oh, perfect. No, that's okay. Let's do it, bro.
It's money that cannot be declared in the country of origin.
At the time, Angel held a diplomatic position as Zimbabwe's presidential envoy and ambassador at large, which allegedly gave him access to sensitive government channels.
He is my first ambassador at large assigned to promote Zimbabwe brand.
This added another layer of concern, blurring the line between religious authority, political influence, and financial exploitation. Supporters defended him, claiming the recordings were taken out of context. But for many observers, the damage was done. The investigation raised serious ethical and legal questions, not just about one man, but about a system that allows religious leaders to operate with little accountability. It's pastors like Hubert Angel who give Christianity a bad name, using the pulpit for profit, lying in the name of God, and turning faith into a business. And while many are waking up, too many are still trapped in the illusion. But anyway, which other pastors did not make it into this list of rich black pastors who lied about God for money? Let us know in the comments section below. Check out this next video displaying on the screen on 12 times, Black pastors got caught scamming live on stage.